"You're coming with me," said the lonely rancher to the woman beaten for giving birth to 4 girls. Arizona Territory, August 1878. The sun hung like a forge fire in the cloudless sky, turning the desert floor into a furnace that could kill a man in hours. Even the lizards had found shade. Nothing moved in that wasteland except the shimmer of heat rising from cracked earth and scattered bones. Samuel Hayes pulled his horse to a stop and reached for his water canteen. The metal burned his palm, but he drank sparingly. 3 sips, no more. He'd been riding since dawn, checking the far boundaries of his land where cattle sometimes wandered, looking for water that wasn't there. The drought had lasted 4 months now. Wells were running dry. Ranchers were selling off herds they couldn't feed. Samuel was 42 years old and felt every year of it in his bones. 2 years ago, he'd buried his wife Mary and their stillborn son beneath the cottonwood behind his ranch house. Since then, he'd spoken maybe 10 words a day, and only to his horse. The desert had a way of teaching men the value of silence. That's when he saw them, vultures. A dozen black shapes wheeling in lazy circles about a half-mile west near a cluster of barrel cactus. Something was dying out there, or already dead. Samuel turned his horse toward the birds. In this heat, whatever it was wouldn't last long. As he rode closer, the sound reached him first. Not the harsh cries of the vultures, but something else. Something that made his chest tighten with recognition. A baby's cry, weak, desperate, barely audible over the desert wind. Then another, and another. Samuel spurred his horse forward and dismounted before the animal had fully stopped. His boots hit the sand running. 20 yards ahead, near a dead mesquite tree, he saw her. A woman, lying face down in the dirt, her dark hair spread around her head like spilled ink. Her dress was torn and bloody. Her arms were stretched out as if she'd been crawling, trying to reach something. And there, in the meager shade of a barrel cactus, were 4 small bundles. 4 babies, newborns, their faces red and wrinkled from the heat. One was crying with what little strength she had left. The other 3 lay still, their tiny chests rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. Samuel dropped to his knees beside the woman. Her skin was burning hot, lips cracked and bleeding from dehydration. But she was breathing, barely. He could see the rise and fall of her ribs, could feel the faint pulse in her neck. She'd been beaten, bad. Her left eye was swollen shut, her jaw discolored with bruises that had turned purple-black in the heat. He moved to the babies next. The crying one, a girl with wisps of dark hair, quieted when he lifted her. Her skin was hot and dry, dangerously dehydrated. The other 3 were in worse shape. Their lips were already turning blue. In this heat, they had minutes, not hours. Samuel didn't hesitate. He pulled off his hat and poured half of his remaining water into it. Then he tore strips from his shirt and soaked them, placing the wet cloth on the baby's lips and foreheads. The crying girl sucked desperately at the fabric. The others stirred slightly at the touch of moisture. The woman was unconscious, but when he lifted her, she murmured something, a single word, barely audible. "Please." Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused and wild with fever, before closing again. Samuel saw something in that brief glimpse that made his jaw clench. Pure terror. Even unconscious, she was afraid. He worked quickly but carefully. First the babies, secured in a makeshift sling across his chest using his torn shirt. Then the woman, draped across his horse's neck while he held her steady. His ranch was 3 miles east. In this heat, it might as well have been 30. But Samuel Hayes had not saved a life in 2 years. He would not let 5 die today. Samuel just made a life-or-death decision that will change everything. If you're already invested in seeing if he can save this family, hit that subscribe button for Tony Tales Tales. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Let's see how far this story of courage travels. The ride back was the longest of Samuel's life. He walked alongside his horse, leading it slowly to avoid jostling his passengers. Every few minutes he stopped to give the babies drops of water and to check on the woman. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes whimpering, sometimes calling out names he couldn't understand. When his ranch house finally came into view, Samuel felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years: hope. The adobe walls looked solid and welcoming. The well in his yard still had water. There was shade and cool rooms and everything he needed to keep 5 people alive. Inside, Samuel laid the woman on his own bed and placed the babies in a wooden crate lined with clean blankets. The house was cool and dark, the thick adobe walls keeping out the desert heat. He lit no lamps, wanting to keep the rooms as dim as possible. Light meant heat, and heat meant death. He spent the next hour moving between the woman and the babies. First, he cleaned her wounds with water and whiskey. The bruises covered most of her body. Someone had beaten her methodically, thoroughly. Her ribs were cracked. Her wrists were rope-burned. This had not been a crime of passion. This had been deliberate. Samuel had never fed a baby before, let alone 4 at once. He soaked clean cloth in goat's milk mixed with water, then let each infant suck from the makeshift nipple. The strongest girl, the one who had been crying, took to it quickly. The others needed coaxing. He worked patiently, moving from one to the next, his large, weathered hands surprisingly gentle as he supported their tiny heads. On the second day, the woman finally woke. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the dim light filtering through the shuttered windows. For a moment, she seemed peaceful, confused. Then memory returned, and her face contorted with terror. She tried to sit up, crying out as her injured ribs protested. "Easy now," Samuel said, his voice rough from disuse. He approached slowly, hands where she could see them. "You're safe. The babies are safe." But she scrambled backward against the headboard, her good eye wide with panic. When he took another step forward, she whimpered and covered her head with her arms, as if expecting a blow. Samuel stopped moving and simply pointed to the wooden crate beside the bed. "Your girls," he said quietly. The woman followed his gesture and gasped. All 4 babies were sleeping, their cheeks pink with health, their breathing steady and strong. Tears began streaming down her face, but she didn't make a sound. Silent weeping, as if even grief had been beaten out of her. "My name is Samuel Hayes," he settled into a chair across the room. "This is my ranch. I found you in the desert 3 days ago. You and the babies were dying." He paused, studying her face. "Someone left you there. Left all of you there." It wasn't a question. They both knew what had happened. She tried to speak, but only a croak came out. Her throat was still raw from dehydration. Samuel poured water into a cup and set it on the table between them, not approaching. She watched him warily, then slowly reached for the cup. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold it, but she managed a few sips. "Elena," she finally whispered. "My name is Elena Morales." Her voice was barely audible. "These are my daughters, Maria, Sofia, Carmen, and Rosa." As she spoke each name, she looked at the corresponding baby, as if making sure they were still breathing. "Who did this to you?" Samuel asked. Elena's face crumpled, and she turned away. "My husband's family," she said, after a long pause. "They said 4 daughters was God's punishment. Said I was cursed." She touched her swollen face gently. "Said the family name would die with me." Elena's voice grew stronger as she continued, though her eyes remained fixed on her babies. "After the birth, my husband's brothers came.
Said 4 girls meant I was touched by evil. They dragged me from the house while I was still bleeding, took my horse, my water, left me in the desert to die. She paused, left my babies to die. Samuel felt a familiar rage building in his chest. He'd felt it before, when his wife Mary had died in childbirth while the town doctor was drunk in a saloon, when the preacher had suggested that God's will was sometimes mysterious, when neighbors had offered empty platitudes instead of real help. Some cruelties were too great for forgiveness. Elena tried to sit up straighter, wincing as her ribs protested. "I need to feed them," she said. "I need to take care of them." But when she attempted to stand, her legs buckled. The beating and dehydration had taken too much out of her. Samuel moved forward instinctively, then stopped when she flinched. "I've been feeding them goat's milk," he said, demonstrating with one of the cloth feeders. "Mixed with a little water, warmed over the fire. They're stronger now than when I found them." He watched as Elena's face softened slightly. "You did good, keeping them alive as long as you did in that heat." With Samuel's help, Elena managed to hold Maria, the strongest of the 4 girls. The baby immediately settled against her mother's chest, as if recognizing her heartbeat. Elena's tears came harder now, but they were tears of relief rather than despair. "I thought they were dead. I thought I'd killed them by bringing them into the world." Over the next few days, Samuel established a routine. He would rise before dawn to tend his remaining cattle, then return to help Elena with the babies. He cooked simple meals: beans and cornbread, eggs when the chickens were laying, thin soup from whatever vegetables he could grow in the harsh soil. Elena ate little, but she was getting stronger. In the evenings, Samuel would sit on his porch, whittling or mending tack, while Elena sang to her daughters. She had a beautiful voice, clear and sweet, and she sang in Spanish, lullabies her own mother had sung to her. The babies seemed to recognize the songs, settling peacefully in her arms. One night, Elena found Samuel at his kitchen table, working by lamplight. He was carving small wooden figures: horses, cattle, simple dolls. His hands moved with practiced skill, turning rough pieces of wood into smooth, polished toys. "For when they're older," he explained without looking up, "every child should have something to play with."
3 weeks after the rescue, Samuel was repairing a fence when he saw the dust cloud on the horizon. 4 riders moving fast across the desert floor. His stomach tightened with recognition. In this country, men only rode that hard when they were hunting something, or someone. Samuel dropped his tools and ran for the house. Elena was inside, nursing Sophia, while the other 3 babies slept in their makeshift cribs. She looked up when he burst through the door and immediately understood. The color drained from her face. "They found us," she whispered. Her hands shook as she gathered Rosa and Carmen to her chest. "They found us." The fear that had been slowly leaving her eyes over the past weeks came flooding back. She looked like a cornered animal, desperate and wild. Samuel moved to his gun cabinet and pulled out his rifle. He checked the ammunition, his movements calm and deliberate despite the storm building inside him. "Take the babies to the back room," he said quietly. "There is a root cellar beneath the floorboards. If things go bad, you hide there until they leave." The riders pulled up in Samuel's yard in a cloud of dust and jangling spurs. The leader was a man in his 50s, well-dressed despite the desert heat, with cold gray eyes and a carefully trimmed beard. Samuel recognized the type, a man who believed his wealth gave him the right to decide who lived and who died. Samuel stepped onto his porch, rifle held loosely in his arms. "You're on my land," he said simply. The leader dismounted and approached with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Name's Diego Morales. I believe you have something that belongs to my family. That woman in there is my brother's wife. She ran off with his children. We've come to bring them home." Samuel didn't move. "Funny thing. Found her in the desert, beaten half to death. Babies, too. Doesn't sound like running off to me."
Diego's face hardened. "You don't understand our ways, gringo. That woman bore 4 daughters, 4. It's a curse on our bloodline. The children carry our name, but she's poison. We should have finished what we started." Something cold and deadly settled in Samuel's chest. He'd heard men talk about women like they were livestock before, but never with such casual cruelty about a mother and her newborn children. His grip tightened on the rifle. "Those babies almost died because of you. Their mother almost died. You left them in the desert like garbage." Diego signaled to his men, who began spreading out around the yard. "The children belong to the Morales family. The woman, well, she can stay here if you want damaged goods, but those babies are coming with us." He smiled coldly. "They'll be raised properly, as sons should be." Samuel raised his rifle slowly, deliberately. "No," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the yard like a judge's sentence. "They're not going anywhere." The other 3 men reached for their guns, but Samuel was already sighted on Diego's chest. "Your move," he said. The standoff stretched like a taut wire. 4 men against 1, but Samuel had the advantage of position and the righteousness of protecting innocence. The desert wind picked up, swirling dust around the horses' hooves. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed.
That's when Elena appeared in the doorway. She was holding all 4 babies, somehow managing to cradle them all against her chest. Her face was pale but determined. She'd heard everything. "Diego," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "Look at them. Really look at your brother's daughters." The babies were beautiful. Even Diego could see that. Their skin was golden, their hair dark and soft. Maria gurgled and reached tiny fingers toward the sunlight. Sophia yawned, displaying perfect pink gums. Carmen and Rosa slept peacefully, their faces serene. They were perfect, healthy children who deserved life. "You call them a curse," Elena said, stepping further onto the porch. "But look at them, Diego. 4 perfect daughters, 4 chances for your brother's blood to continue, to marry good men, to bear strong grandchildren. How is that a curse?" Her voice grew stronger with each word. "You tried to murder your own nieces because they weren't sons." For the first time, Diego hesitated. His brother's wife was right. The children were healthy, beautiful, and 4 daughters could mean 4 advantageous marriages, 4 connections to other powerful families. His certainty began to crack like dried mud. Samuel saw the doubt in Diego's eyes and pressed the advantage. "You leave now and this ends here. You ride away and never come back. Let them build a life." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried like thunder. "Or you can try to take them and see how that works out for you." The other 3 riders were already backing their horses away. They'd seen the look in Samuel's eyes, heard the certainty in his voice. This wasn't a man making empty threats. This was a man prepared to die protecting what mattered to him. And they weren't being paid enough to die for Diego's wounded pride. Diego looked at his men, at Samuel's unwavering rifle, and Elena holding 4 healthy babies. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured bladder. "This isn't over," he said, but the words lacked conviction. He remounted his horse with as much dignity as he could manage. "Yes, it is," Elena called after them. "It's over." The 4 riders spurred their horses and rode hard toward the horizon, leaving only settling dust and the memory of their threats. Samuel kept his rifle raised until they were specks in the distance, then finally lowered it. Elena's legs gave out as the adrenaline left her system. Samuel caught her and the babies, steadying them all with his strong arms. She was shaking, but not from fear this time, from relief, from the realization that they were truly safe now. They sat on the porch for a long time,
The babies spread between them on blankets. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say that the desert wind wasn't already whispering. They had faced down death and cruelty together. They had chosen each other, chosen life, chosen hope. Over the following weeks, Samuel threw himself into making the ranch a proper home for a family. He built 4 individual cribs from mesquite wood, sanded smooth so the babies couldn't get splinters. He expanded the house, adding a larger room for Elena and the girls. He dug a new well closer to the house so Elena wouldn't have to carry water so far. Elena grew stronger every day. The bruises faded, her ribs healed, and most importantly, the fear left her eyes. She sang to her daughters constantly, teaching them their names, telling them stories in both Spanish and English. She wanted them to know both sides of their heritage, the good parts worth keeping. They fell into an easy routine. Samuel would work the ranch during the day while Elena tended the babies. In the evenings, they would cook together, take turns feeding the girls, and sit on the porch watching the desert sunset. They didn't talk much about the future. They were too busy building it one day at a time. The babies thrived in the desert air. Maria was the first to smile, a toothless grin that made both adults laugh out loud. Sophia learned to grip Samuel's finger and wouldn't let go. Carmen discovered her own feet and spent hours studying them with intense concentration. Rosa was the quiet one, but her eyes were alert, taking in everything around her. One evening, Elena found Samuel carving wooden blocks, each one inscribed with one of the girls' names. "So they'll always know who they are," he explained. "So they'll know they matter." Elena touched the block marked Maria and smiled. "They'll know," she said softly, "because someone cared enough to carve it in wood." As autumn approached, bringing cooler nights and the promise of gentler weather, Samuel and Elena found themselves sitting closer together on the porch. Their hands would brush when they both reached for the same baby. Their eyes would meet over the tops of small heads during feeding time. Something was growing between them, careful and patient, like desert flowers after rare rain. One night, as they watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky, Samuel cleared his throat. "Elena," he said carefully, "that is, if you wanted to, you and the girls could stay, permanently. This could be your home." Elena looked at him for a long moment, then at her daughters, sleeping peacefully in their cradles. "Is that what you want?" she asked. "More than anything," Samuel replied. They were married at sunset 3 days later, with no one present but the babies and the desert wind as witness. Samuel had ridden to town and returned with a simple gold band that fit Elena's finger perfectly. They spoke their vows quietly, promising to love and protect each other and the girls for as long as they both lived. Spring came to the desert like a miracle. Cacti bloomed in brilliant reds and yellows. The air smelled of sage and possibility. The babies were sitting up now, babbling to each other in their own mysterious language. Samuel had built a larger porch where they could play safely in the shade. Maria took her first steps on a warm April morning, toddling unsteadily from Elena's arms to Samuel's outstretched hands. Sophia followed 2 days later, then Carmen, then Rosa. Suddenly, the house was full of the sound of small feet pottering across wooden floors and delighted laughter echoing off adobe walls. By summer, Elena was pregnant again. This time, there was no fear, only joy. Samuel would place his hand on her growing belly in the evenings, feeling the baby kick, and Elena would see the wonder in his eyes. "Boy or girl?" she asked him once. "Doesn't matter. Healthy is all that counts."
Their son was born in October, during the season of cooler nights and golden light. Samuel delivered him himself, just as he had saved Elena and her daughters from the desert. They named him David, and his 4 big sisters adored him instantly, bringing him flowers and singing him the lullabies their mother had taught them. As the girls grew older, Samuel taught them to ride, to rope cattle, to read the signs of the desert. Elena taught them to cook, to sew, to speak Spanish, and to be proud of their heritage. They grew up strong and confident, knowing they were loved unconditionally by the 2 people who mattered most. The ranch prospered too. Word spread about the family who had defied death in the desert, and travelers began stopping by for meals and rest. Elena's cooking became legendary, and Samuel's reputation for fairness and hard work brought him respect throughout the territory. They built additional rooms for guests and hands to help with the expanding herd. Years passed. The 4 girls grew into beautiful, strong young women. Maria became a teacher. Sophia married a good man and started her own family nearby. Carmen became a nurse, helping other women through difficult births. Rosa followed in her stepfather's footsteps, becoming one of the few female ranchers in the territory. Samuel and Elena aged gracefully together, their love deepening with each shared sunset, each grandchild born, each crisis weathered side by side. Samuel's hair went white, Elena's gained silver streaks, but their hands still found each other automatically when they sat on their porch in the evenings. At family gatherings, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Elena would sometimes catch Samuel's eye across the crowded table. They would share a look that spoke of miracles and second chances, of love born from the ashes of cruelty, of a family created not by blood alone, but by choice and commitment. The wooden blocks Samuel had carved with the girls' names became family treasures, passed down through generations. Each block was smooth with handling, worn by small fingers learning to spell, treasured as proof that sometimes the most precious things in life come from the simplest acts of love. In their final years, when Samuel's back was bent from decades of hard work and Elena's hands were gnarled with arthritis, they would still sit on their porch each evening. Their children and grandchildren grown and scattered across the territory, but their love for each other undimmed by time or hardship. The ranch still stands today, though different families work the land now. But locals say that on quiet desert evenings, when the wind is just right, you can still hear the sound of children's laughter echoing across the sagebrush and the faint melody of Spanish lullabies carried on the cooling air. Sometimes the greatest acts of heroism aren't grand gestures or dramatic rescues. Sometimes they're as simple as refusing to walk away from suffering, as basic as choosing love over fear, as quiet as carving a child's name in wood so she'll always know she matters. In the harsh beauty of the Arizona desert, Samuel Hayes and Elena Morales proved that broken people can heal each other, that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, and that the strongest families are built not just on blood, but on the unshakable decision to choose each other again and again, no matter what the world throws at them. From the brink of death in the desert to a thriving ranch family, what an incredible journey! If this story of rescue, love, and chosen family touched your heart, subscribe to Tony Tells Tales for more powerful stories where ordinary people do extraordinary things. Drop a comment telling us where you're from and what moment hit you hardest. Remember, sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who simply refuse to walk away from suffering. Until next time, keep choosing love over fear.